Action. The storm gathers. A cold wind moves across the Neva River, carrying fine snow that settles into the cracks of shattered stone and frozen earth. The city's skyline stands dark against a pale northern sky, domes and smokestacks rising above streets already scarred by shellfire. Tram lines hang silent, their wires swaying gently. Somewhere in the distance, artillery thuds with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Windows are boarded, walls blackened by smoke, and people move quietly, wrapped in layers of worn cloth against the deepening cold. Beyond the city limits, encircling forces dig into forests and marshland, their supply lines stretching back across occupied territory. The front does not surge forward here. It tightens. Roads close. Rail lines fall silent. A great city, once a center of industry and culture, is about to be cut off from the world. What follows will not be decided in days or weeks, but in years. In June 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the massive invasion of the Soviet Union. German forces advanced rapidly across a broad front, aiming to destroy Soviet armies and capture key political and economic centers. Among the primary objectives in the north was Leningrad, a major industrial hub and the birthplace of the Russian Revolution. Its capture would eliminate a vital arms-producing city, secure the Baltic region, and link German forces with those of Finland, which sought to regain territories lost in earlier conflicts with the Soviet Union. For the Soviet leadership, Leningrad held immense symbolic and strategic importance. Losing the city would mean not only a military and industrial setback, but also a severe blow to national morale. Its ports, factories, and transportation networks supported the broader war effort. The city's population, numbering in the millions, would soon find itself on the front line of a struggle that combined conventional warfare with a campaign of encirclement and starvation. As German and Finnish forces advanced from the south and north, Soviet troops and civilians prepared for a defense that would rely on endurance as much as firepower. The coming siege would become one of the longest and most devastating in modern history. Acts 2. The plans. Army Group North, commanded by Field Marshal Wilhelm von Lieb, drove toward Leningrad with armored and infantry formations supported by the Luftwaffe. Rather than storm the city directly at once, German planners increasingly favored encirclement, believing that cutting supply routes would force surrender without the heavy losses of urban combat. Finnish forces advanced from the north, stopping short of a full assault, but helping to seal the city's isolation. Inside Leningrad, Soviet defenses fell under the authority of regional commanders operating under orders from Moscow. Regular Red Army units were reinforced by hastily formed militia divisions made up of workers, students, and older reservists. Civilians dug trenches, built barricades, and prepared defensive lines on the city's outskirts. Morale varied. German forces, confident after earlier successes, expected the Soviet Union to weaken quickly. Soviet soldiers and civilians understood that retreat offered little safety. Orders emphasized holding the city at all costs. Factories continued operating even as the front drew closer, producing weapons under the constant threat of bombardment. The objectives on each side could not be reconciled. One sought to isolate and break the city, the other to endure and keep it alive. The terrain around Leningrad shaped the coming struggle. Forests, rivers, lakes, and marshland limited maneuver and channeled advances along key roads and railways. As German forces pushed forward in late summer 1941, they captured towns and transport links that connected the city to the rest of the Soviet Union. Rail lines were severed, and major highways fell under enemy control. The last land routes were gradually cut, leaving only Lake Ladoga to the east as a potential lifeline. Soviet planners began organizing supply routes across the lake, first by boat in warmer months, and later by vehicle convoys over winter ice. weather would become a decisive factor. Autumn rains turned roads to mud, slowing movement and complicating logistics. As winter approached, temperatures dropped sharply, freezing waterways and ground alike. Both attackers and defenders faced the challenge of supplying troops in harsh northern conditions. Air raids and artillery fire began striking the city regularly. Warehouses, food depots, and infrastructure were hit. Fires spread through wooden buildings, and smoke drifted over districts already preparing for a prolonged isolation. By September 1941, Leningrad was effectively surrounded, and the siege had begun. Act III, the collision. The first months of the siege brought intense bombardment and rapid deterioration of living conditions. German artillery and aircraft targeted industrial sites, power stations, and supply depots. One early air raid destroyed significant food reserves, worsening an already critical situation. Inside the city, rationing was imposed as supplies dwindled. Bread rations were reduced repeatedly, and substitutes such as sawdust and other fillers were added to stretch flour stocks. Fuel shortages left homes and public buildings unheated as winter set in. Water systems failed in many districts, forcing residents to collect water from holes cut in frozen canals under the threat of shellfire. On the front lines, Soviet troops defended a shrinking perimeter, counterattacking where possible but often forced to conserve ammunition and manpower. Improvised fortifications rose among parks, boulevards, and factory yards. Civilian life and military defense merged as workers left assembly lines to man anti-aircraft guns or dig trenches. Disease and starvation began to claim more lives than direct combat. The city's population faced a struggle for survival, measured not in territory gained or lost, but in calories, warmth, and the ability to endure another day. At this moment in the battle, do you think this decision was a mistake? Or was it unavoidable? Let me know your view in the comments. Even as conditions worsened, efforts to maintain supply across Lake Ladoga continued, offering a narrow but vital connection to the outside. Act IV, the break. The decisive shift in the siege came not from a single dramatic assault, but from gradual changes in the wider war. In late 1942 and early 1943, Soviet forces achieved major victories elsewhere on the Eastern Front, most notably at Stalingrad. These successes weakened German reserves and forced a redistribution of forces. In January 1943, Soviet troops launched Operation Iskra, a coordinated offensive aimed at breaking the blockade's tightest grip. Attacking from inside the city's perimeter and from positions to the east, Soviet units managed to open a narrow land corridor along the southern shore of Lake Ladoga. Though still under enemy fire, this corridor allowed the construction of a rail line that improved the flow of food, fuel, and ammunition. The siege was not fully lifted at that moment, but the worst phase of isolation had ended. Leningrad could now be supplied more reliably, and its defenders could rebuild strength. Over the following year, continued Soviet offensives gradually pushed German forces farther from the city. In January 1944, a major offensive finally forced the complete withdrawal of besieging troops, ending the siege after more than 2 years. The city had survived. ACTV, the aftershocks. The human cost of the siege was immense. Estimates vary, but well over 1 million civilians are believed to have died, primarily from starvation, cold, and disease. Military casualties on both sides also numbered in the hundreds of thousands over the prolonged campaign. Much of Leningrad's infrastructure was damaged or destroyed. Historic buildings were scarred by shelling. Factories were worn down by constant use under extreme conditions, and entire neighborhoods bore the marks of fire and bombardment. Yet key industries had continued to function, contributing weapons and equipment to the Soviet war effort even during the worst periods. Militarily, the failure to capture Leningrad tied down significant German and Finnish forces for years. resources that might have been used elsewhere remained committed to a siege that did not achieve its intended result. For the Soviet Union, the defense became a symbol of endurance and the ability to sustain resistance under extreme hardship. The Siege of Leningrad changed history by demonstrating that the German strategy of rapid encirclement and destruction could be blunted by determined defense and long-term resilience. The city's survival denied Germany a key strategic objective in the north and prevented the consolidation of Axis control over the entire Baltic region. By tying down enemy forces and preserving a major industrial center, the siege influenced the broader balance on the Eastern Front. As Soviet production expanded east of the Urals and counteroffensives gained strength, the inability to eliminate Leningrad became part of a larger pattern in which initial German advances were reversed over time. The siege also shaped post-war military thinking about urban resilience, logistics under encirclement, and the limits of siege warfare in the modern industrial age. Historians continue to study it not only for its scale and suffering, but because it marked a point where endurance, organization, and external relief combined to overcome a strategy designed to force collapse without direct capture. Today, the streets of St. Petersburg carry few visible signs of the blockade's front lines, yet the memory of those years remains deeply embedded in the city's history. The siege stands as a reminder of how warfare can extend beyond battlefields into daily survival, and how the fate of a single city can influence the direction of a global conflict. History is shaped by moments like this. Share this story if it mattered to you, and follow the channel for more battles that change the world.